Hey everybody, and welcome to the Love of Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Lyle Gator, and today is New Year's Day. We have a new year on our hands, and I'm looking forward to bringing you a new episode of the Love of Fishing podcast. Today I'm joined by good friend Victor Papaiz as we recap 2022 and share some things that we both learned on the water. Hopefully it helps you guys in your year upcoming and that you'll enjoy this episode. So without any further ado, let's get into it and our discussion with Victor Papaiz. If you're new to the show, we do have the show on Spotify and also on YouTube. So if you drive to work, flip this on. It's going to be there for season 3. Anyways, we're going to get into it. Bit of a change of pace for myself in 2022. Post-COVID for me meant getting back to basics. I didn't guide. That was a big change. That was a big change. There's a lot of reasons for that, but what this allowed me to do was fish some tournaments. Fish some places that I hadn't fished before or in a long time.
And fish more with me, which was nice.
And also fish more with Victor, which, as he alludes to, was excellent. We're going to go through a few things. I've had to limit it a little bit so that this isn't a 3-hour podcast.
Maybe we'll upload an extended version somewhere else.
We'll do a bonus cut for the subscribers. We're going to talk about tournaments. I fished the TBBA series this summer with good friend Josh. I was a non-boater, which was a change, usually being the guy on the trolling motor, obviously with guiding. So the chance to really focus on the fishing aspect was huge. So a lot of things that I learned there. I also fished with livescope for the whole summer when I was doing that.
I also got to interject something there. You say you fished as a non-boater. You do not know what fishing as a non-boater truly means. I think it's very different if you're the non-boater in a team event versus being a non-boater when you're fishing against the boater or just trying to weigh in a separate bag. I fished the Northeastern Divisional Championship, run through Bass in the St. Lawrence. Both days you just get paired with a random angler, and since it's the Northeastern Divisional, they can be from everywhere from like Maryland, New Hampshire, New York, or from Ontario. They fish very differently in those areas, and not just different techniques, but different approaches to the water, where I've grown up fishing the Niagara River, spent a lot of time now in the St. Lawrence, so I know how to fish drifts a certain way, and I like breaking down water certain ways, and I'm used to my boaters doing that. And then you get paired in a boat with someone that just wants to drag around a 5-inch Senko for the whole day. And mind you learn a lot because those guys caught him dragging a 5-inch Senko on the St. Lawrence, which blows my mind.
Yeah.
But it's kind of frustrating when you have an idea of where you should be casting and they're just not setting up the boat right. And you're not really in a place where you can say, I think you should do this. Sometimes they'll ask your opinion. But since it's not a team event, they're trying to prioritize themselves, which is what you have to do. You can't be mad at them at all for doing that. You're just along for the ride.
Right.
When you're fishing with Josh, he's in control of the boat, but you are working together constructively.
Absolutely.
Which is the nice thing about the St. Catharines Bass Club too, and always fishing those events, which I didn't get a chance to do this year. But anyways, you can continue. Just different non-boat. Yeah, just small interjection there.
So I fished a team tournament with
You
Josh.
fished a team tournament with Josh.
And I was not the guy driving the boat.
Yes.
But we worked together. It was great.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through a little bit of that. So things that I learned from that. We fished smallmouth and largemouth, Rondo Bay, Lake St. Clair, Long Point.
Right.
So those were 3 similar enough fisheries, but also kind of different. Victor and I also went on a trip to the Gatineau area.
Yeah, family cottage up there that I've gone to every year of my life, and it's I think Lyle's been hearing about it for at least the last 10 years, ever since I met him, because it's just kind of the mecca of bass fishing, in my opinion. It's the best lake I've ever encountered for largemouth, and one's of a pretty good size, so I feel like I finally got to bring you up there, and I don't know if it even surpassed your expectations after I've been hyping it up all these years, but I think it
far
probably
exceeded.
did. Yes, far exceeded.
I don't know Victor to be someone who will unnecessarily emphasize or blow things out of proportion, but his words were that this you'll catch more largemouth
in one day
than you will have in your entire life.
Yes.
And he wasn't wrong.
We had a pretty good time of it.
It was pretty fun. Yeah. So getting into the tournament stuff, hopefully I can share something that, if you're listening, you can take on the water with you when you're out, whether it's bass fishing or just fishing in general. I know I picked up a lot. I think the opportunity to not be concerned with keeping people in the water, you know, when you're guiding, you're always retying lines. You don't have the same feel for everything that's going on because you're also providing customer service, and I love that. But as an angler, there's a big difference. So tournament fishing, I really got back into that. You know, when you have those zen moments where you're just like, it's you, the rod, your bait, and you are just fishing. Very cool. First tournament of the year was on the St. Clair River / Lake Huron, and it was really cool. We fished, obviously, super clear water. We ended up fishing really shallow water. In the second week of July, the fish were still pulled up in under 5 feet of water.
And that wasn't in the river. You went all the way to the lake.
We did go to the lake, yeah. We didn't find a lot in the river. Not saying it's not a good fishery, but it just didn't... We didn't feel like we had enough to get 5 to compete. So we ended up running 30 miles one way to the northern extent of the tournament boundary. I think we finished 7th out of 30 teams or 35 teams.
You said you'd found the winning spot. Was that different?
We definitely did find the winning spot.
Yeah.
We found them, but we didn't clue in. Like, we got a good bag. I think we got 20 pounds or something, but we didn't clue in until those guys had already got to that winning spot and caught the bigger fish. So we were catching their leftovers, which, I mean, I'm sure that happens all the time, no matter what level of tournament you're doing. But yeah.
That's why guys invest in the fastest boats, because you just have to beat people to the spots.
Sure.
A lot of time I've been in other situations where you have your spot that you found in pre-fish and you're super confident in it. You pull up day one and someone's already been there for 20 minutes, and what can you do? Nothing.
Yeah.
But that's part of the game, and that's unfortunately what drives 300 horsepower motors to be a necessity for these kinds of events now. But you know.
We did have livescope,
yes.
Which it was funny because Josh and I were like, you know, really hoping to have it ready, and yeah, we ended up fishing.
So were you learning it at the same time that you were fishing, or had you had some time to get comfortable with the livescope beforehand?
Yeah, so we fished once before together. We went to the lower Niagara, and fished, and just got a feel for like the casting distance off the nose of the boat, and really matching to your screen. I mean, that played in every event that we fished, was the ability to make a precise cast. And most of the times, if you did that and you were throwing at a bass, you would catch it.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
When I talk about some of the later tournaments, that's where, when I said, if it's a bass, it's going to eat it, that's where that comes in. But we fished less than 5 feet of water. Livescope was useless. That tournament was crazy because the wind was the main factor, and how it moved those fish. We're fishing a giant point, and they're only on the very tip of the windward side.
The windward side, yeah.
So they were getting blown up onto it, and I mean, we've seen that before, especially walleye guys. They know that, but for me, it was very obvious that was the main driver.
And I love fishing with Josh because he's going to be the one to clue into that. Like, he's expecting to find details like that. Like, I know fishing offshore with the money, or you find like a nice sand patch in the mud or something, and he doesn't like to just fan cast the sand patch. He's going to find which transition, like which side of the transition is where the fish are loaded up.
Yeah.
And if it's in the wind, with that, like against the wind, that kind of thing. So you find a sand patch with Josh, you're not just fishing it, you're fishing one specific cast of it. And that's so I'm not surprised he brings that to the tournament fishing too.
Yeah, the spot on the spot was real. So that one there, yeah, we finished pretty good. Learned a lot about the Lake Huron thing. Another thing that Josh likes to do is obviously fish deep water. I like that too. But out there, once you got out of that inshore stuff, like I'd say 5 to 12 feet of water, it drops off really fast, and the water's so clear that it's like a needle in a haystack to find fish offshore. There's guys whizzing by you going walleye fishing, salmon, trout fishing. Like, it's the abyss once you get out there. So we never fished anything, you know, we couldn't find anything that was out deep.
Right.
I'm sure it's there, but when you go up for 2 days and
Yeah, what can you expect?
You have to find a bag. You can't cover everything.
Yeah.
The next spot that we went to was Lake St. Clair, which
I've never gotten to fish.
I know you haven't fished. This was my first time, and man, did it lived up to the hype. It was sweet. Very, very cool fishery. Livescope. This is the place to have livescope.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a bowl. It's 20 feet, pretty much everywhere in the lake.
Yeah. Well, it's the lake that put livescope on the map, in my opinion. A tournament 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, where it got one, or all the top 5 had livescope, and that's what they were using.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we prepared for that one by watching the Bassmaster coverage from that tournament so that we could see what guys were doing. It's hard to get spots because it's such a big lake. Like, you could see where they're fishing, but you couldn't kind of pinpoint it. But we looked at their technique, and I think we matched that pretty well. That tournament, we also found the winning spot, but we got beat there by somebody.
That's funny.
That was kind of the theme. But at least after 2 days of pre-fishing, we ended up organically finding it.
Yeah.
I can honestly say, like, if you're listening and you fish tournaments, you know that there's some boats that always do well, and there's some guys that always follow those boats that do well.
Yeah.
We didn't really know coming in because we weren't locals, where those community holes are. So we did a lot of scanning, and we got beat by a faster boat.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Again. But very, very cool. That lake is crazy because there's so many walleye, so many suckers, muskie.
Too, technically.
Oh, dude. So many muskies. Sturgeon. Incredible amount of sturgeon.
Did you see all these species when you were there? Or?
Saw them all.
Wow.
Saw them all, man.
Unreal.
Either on the live scope or on the camera. Because we could camera very effectively in 20 feet of water.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we'd find, on the live scope, we'd find little weed patches. There's no rock in that lake. So you'd find these weed clumps, and, like, live scope's lit up. So you look at it, and we'd fish some of it, but we also didn't want to sting our fish. So then we're trying to gamble, like, are those bass? Camera was really important.
Yeah. Were you drop shotting the whole time, or were you? I know a lot of people crank out there. And
we drop shotted almost exclusively just because the crankbaits would keep fouling. There's a lot of floating weed.
Okay. Yeah.
I think if you were fishing at a time where there wasn't that floating weed, cranks would be great, because you can pick a crankbait that goes the right depth, and you're off to the races. But I gotta say, like, that was the most fun place to pre-fish because there was always so much that you could learn through cameraing and, like, just, like, picking it apart.
Tech, yeah.
Such a cool place to fish. And that was really cool for me to experience that, and now, somewhere down the road, I'm going to apply that. Like that, learning how to pick it apart, going to a new place, and getting a process down. It was so cool.
Yeah.
And I know you're familiar with that.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I'd say the process and the prep. And I guess you can include the prep in the process. And I think transferable skill from guiding is mastering that prep.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very, very important thing. I love the prep too. It's like, who doesn't like tinkering with baits and picking up rods and stuff? But it's not just that. It's prepping yourself, like, mentally for the day, having a game plan, or setting the proper expectations as well. So yes, literal and mental prep is a really big aspect to it.
For sure. I think that the timing of me going to do these tournaments in sort of the bigger picture of having guided locally for 3 years, this would have been my 4th year if I did guide, and just some of the ruts that you get into with your prep. And I'm not going to say that it's laziness that creeps in, because I definitely wouldn't describe myself as a lazy person, but I can see why these guys that have been guiding for a long time, if you don't stay on top of it and you don't challenge yourself and you don't get out of your zone, you start to become complacent with finding out how your fishery has changed.
Right.
Because one thing that you get to do when you fish new water is you accept the day for what it is, and you have to just go for it.
Well, there's a guiding question I have for you too, is because when you have clients in the boat, in my mind, you're not going to be exploring much. You find something that works, you're going to take clients there. I guess if it's not working, then you might explore with them, or do you just go to backup spots that you've already explored in the past too?
Yeah.
Right? Like I assume you're not exploring with clients, which is a big part of pre-fishing and tournament fishing when stuff isn't going to plan.
Yeah, so it's a great question because, yeah, I would say with 95% of my clients, I can't explore. I physically and mentally can't bring myself to do it.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't pan out, now what do I say?
Yeah.
So
you say, hey, welcome to fishing. This is what it is most of the time. It's exploring and not catching.
You really don't want to have to tell them that.
Yeah, no, true.
But you're right.
It's
It's a dilemma. And I think one of the crazy things about livescope is if you're a guide and you have livescope, maybe you can explore. Because all of the things that you're saying in your head about, well, maybe if I fish this spot this way or if I go to this area, you kind of know what you might be able to expect out of it. Your client that steps on board, that's fishing for the 5th time in their life, they have no context. They just see you driving around, stopping on a spot for 5 minutes and then you pack up. Like, I think there's a certain mental game there where if you can show your client, there's a fish, cast at it.
Right.
It's 60 feet at this angle. They're going to trust the process.
Yeah, or showing them like a rock pile on the side scan.
Sure.
I remember when I fished in the high school or the junior club in St. Catharines. It was the same thing. You're fishing with the boater. They're basically your guide for the day. Like you're not making any of the calls, or I guess some high school students might, but back in the day I wasn't, just going along for the ride. And yeah, same thing. We pull up to a spot, 5 minutes. Like they're not even fishing yet. I'm just why don't we have our lines in the water?
Yep.
Of course they're scanning, but I didn't really even know what that was at the time. And then by the time I was a couple of years in the club, I started to become more interested in what they're actually doing behind the graph, and became friends with some of them and go with them on weekends.
Yeah.
And the way some of those guys spend their weekends, it isn't just going out and trying to slay as many fish as possible. It's going out, and a lot of them just like to explore and get the satisfaction of finding a new spot. I know some guys that their goal for the year is just to find 10 new spots where they've caught a 5-pounder, or catch a 5-pounder in 10 new spots. Versus just going back to the same places they've always caught them and wrecking them. They get more satisfaction out of the other things. So again, there it comes to love of the process as well, and just a couple different ways you can gain some satisfaction out of fishing. Yeah,
it's one of the beautiful things about this sport is you never get tired of it.
Yes.
If you enjoy the process.
Yep.
If you're just out to catch a PB and that's the only thing you want, you don't enjoy all the learning that goes into it.
Yes.
It's not going to be for you.
Different kinds of goals you can set for any kind of day on the water, and I think it's the act of working towards achieving that goal, whether that goal is catching like 20 bluegill or 100 bass in a day.
Yeah. Or
even 1 bass from shore. No matter what the goal is, if you achieve that goal, you're going to feel pretty good.
Right.
So it's learning to set reasonable goals. That there's still going to be a challenge in achieving, but I think you know what I mean.
I do.
Yeah.
This is a very interesting segue because coming up on January 28th, we have the Niagara Fishing Tackle Swap, and I'm actually going to be speaking about setting up for a successful day on the water.
Oh, cool.
So it's going to be talking a lot about things like that where, you have expectations for yourself or for your crew, looking at your, it's basically like a SWOT analysis of your day.
Yeah.
Whether, skill of the anglers involved. It's all things, if you're looking to have fun, which I hope you are, if you're going fishing.
Yep.
I hope that's your goal.
Right.
How you can do that and prepare for that.
Right.
So that's just a little ad for the listeners.
And I imagine as a guide too, if you have someone that's never caught a fish in their life, the thing that's going to bring them the most joy is just catching a fish.
Right.
If they catch a giant fish or a small fish, the level, it's going to be diminishing returns, right? You get an initial piece of joy for just catching one fish at all, right. And then how much happier you're going to be if you catch a few more. I'm sure a bit, but that's not the point. Versus someone that's used to slaying, they're super excited to finally go out on Lake Erie for the first time ever. Yeah. They're planning to wreck them, and then maybe they only get one fish. That one fish would have made that other guy super happy, but for them it's like, oh my gosh, I just only caught one fish. So, yeah.
That's the game, man.
So days when you knew you'd be fishing tougher conditions on the water, do you kind of drop hints with the client that it might be a particularly hard day and try to set their expectations? Or you just do they just come to you hoping to just catch fish in general? Like, will you try to, like, not manipulate their expectations, but kind of prep them for what they should get some satisfaction out of achieving?
Yeah, I think it's really important to be honest. I always hope that from the very first time that I pick up the phone with a client to when they show up with me, that we have a level of trust. That's very key. I've had clients in the past that you can tell, and I think this is because I'm young, they don't trust me and they don't think that I know what I'm talking about. And if the conditions are such that I believe the fishing is going to be disproportionately tough, it might be time to reschedule the trip.
Right.
If I know and I trust with the client that they're in for a challenge and that they are craving that challenge, then I'll be upfront and say, you know, here's the situation. I've found that when this is the case, things are difficult. Would you still like to go?
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
You really have to. You also can't drag a family of 4 with 2, 6 and 10-year-olds out onto Lake Erie when it's 4-footers.
Obviously not.
No one's going to have a good time.
No, that's fine.
Even the guide.
Even the guide. Oh, I believe it. Some of the stories I've heard, yeah.
So, no doubt. Yeah, it's about managing expectations more than anything. I mean, the fishing is almost secondary when you're doing that kind of customer service. Yeah. And I think the tournaments that I fished this year and some of the other things that I got to do without complicating it with bringing other people along necessarily was really just dialing into what does the day give me, what are the conditions, and how can I best fish it. And I think this year was the first time in many years that I wasn't forced to be in a rut of, it's this time of year, I have to do this, I have to fish these spots because I need to fish my A-game stuff. And it was the best.
Right.
It was really cool. Yeah. And I know for you, we're going to talk about our trip to the Gatineau area. For you, that place is a mecca for exploration.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, too, I started fishing that place in a tin boat with my grandfather, my dad, and I'd say we drop shot live worms, but it wasn't even a drop shot. It's like you have a whatever kind of scrap metal for a weight, and then higher up the line you have one of those pre-tied like bare hooks with like a 5-inch leader, and we just kind of niche that onto the line and have the worm.
Yeah, the old snell.
The old snell.
Yeah.
So that's how I was first introduced to that place, and the fishing was incredible. Mm-hmm. And then over the years, I got a kayak so I could get places the boat kind of couldn't really. And then in more recent years, I had like a fishing kayak that I could stand up on and properly flip and frog. And then this year was the first time I got the kayak with the graph up. So I was actually able to graph everything. And we found some offshore largemouth in like, 20 feet?
Yeah.
That I'd never fished before. And I can guarantee you no one at that lake had fished before. And as soon as you make a cast somewhere near the rock that you see, you immediately get bit. But I've enjoyed it every single year ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
Except I've been able to enjoy it in new ways. And the biggest learning curve came, or the biggest return on investment came really when I started learning new techniques. That was the biggest thing.
Sure.
Sure, the graphing's opened up a little bit more, but just learning different techniques. And the great thing about that lake, where you're kind of guaranteed to catch them if you're not doing something crazy like throwing a pink Senko, is...
shots fired.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shot fire. It's a great place to learn new techniques that you wouldn't learn anywhere else. Like if I want to try a new technique here on the Henley, where I know there's some good largemouth, I might have to spend 3 days before I get a bite, even if I'm doing it correctly.
Sure.
When at this lake, if I'm not getting a bite literally in 5 or 10 minutes, literally 5 minutes, I know, okay, I'm probably fishing this technique improperly, or...
It's not something they'll bite.
Or it's not something they'll bite. One of those two things. And usually it's something that they will bite. It's just fishing it properly.
Yeah.
So it's a great... And even just learning how to set the hook properly on different baits. Like the first time I ever Carolina rigged, I was trying it up there. Finding which rods are the best for throwing different kinds of baits. Like what can I get away with throwing like a larger swim bait on?
Yeah.
This year I was a little bit restricted because most of my rods were in Kingston. So I was using the supply of rods that I'd left at home, which still worked. Like, I mean, I guess I'm pretty spoiled because those were still some pretty nice rods that I was able to use. Just a couple IMXs or something, but But like throwing a jig or a swim bait on and like a 7-Eleven extra heavy, lost some fish. I'm like, okay, I see why this isn't the ideal rod for this kind of thing.
It's a pool cue.
It's a pool cue. But I think like you can obviously go down the slippery slope of having a technique specific rod for everything. But there is definitely something to be said for using the right rod for the right technique.
Yeah.
Obviously, but there's certain rods that you can get away with doing a lot with. But to my point, just learning things like how to properly set the hook to see, okay, if your hookup ratio is like 9 out of 10 versus 7 out of 10 with different kinds of hook setting techniques.
Yeah.
That's the place to learn it. Stuff like that, which I've never taken for granted because I knew how special that was. And it's so hard to learn that if you're not somewhere where you're continually catching fish.
It's like a lab.
It's like a lab, yeah.
For fishing. Like, and you know, I experienced it for the first time. You had hyped it up for years. And for people that are listening, like, they're not 12-inch largemouth.
No, we got
quite a few over 4.
Yeah.
And you got a 5. And like most of the fish are between 2 and 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Like they're quality fish by any standard. And yeah, it's like a lab where you can run experiments.
Yeah. And it's nice because they're of a size where they can eat any kind of bait. Like you can throw big baits or small baits.
Right.
Which helps out in that whole learning thing. So it's one thing just to be able to go there and enjoy just catching a ton of fish. But what I really like is, because I have the opportunity to catch so many fish, really honing specific skills and doing it. Because you can go there and you can throw a Senko all day and you'll probably outfish any other technique.
Yeah.
But you can also hone any technique so well, and you don't have the opportunity to do that anywhere else. So I don't think I threw a Senko. Well, no, I did throw a Senko, or like I give my mom a Senko to throw kind of thing, and then she catches a 4.
Yeah,
kind of thing. But
the casual evening bite, and there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, just an incredible place. We had perfect weather too, which was just so nice.
And fun rigs too. You got the double on the donkey.
I did. I got 2 largemouth over, I'd say 2.5 pounds at the same time on a donkey rig.
Yeah, and I challenged you with that. I don't think I did it this year, but I'd done it the year before.
No, you sent me on my way. You said go catch 2.
Yeah, this is your goal for tonight. Yep. Here, take this rig, catch me 2 at once, or don't come back. And then, you came back eventually.
I did. And the other cool thing was, and you'd explained this to me before, but you take a 1 ounce swim jig. No, a 1 ounce flipping jig.
If you have a swim jig, you can do it with a swim jig. This is the craziest technique I ever came across up there. I forgot how I even stumbled upon it. I think it was back in the day when I only had some really heavy jigs, and I wanted to fish like a swim jig. So what I was doing, I had to reel the jig so fast to keep it above this these grass fields that were not quite they were still submergent, but there was maybe a foot of water between the surface and the top of the weeds.
Not much room. And
I was just trying to swim a swim jig over it, but I only had like a 1 ounce swim jig, so I'm burning this thing and getting absolutely clobbered. So you're just, and I used lighter jigs since and just reeled them slower. Doesn't work as well.
It doesn't have the same impact.
Doesn't have the same impact. You're just whipping out this super heavy swim jig and burning it as fast as you physically can.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you just barely feel a tick, and then it just loads up, and other times it just gets clobbered. And the thing is, it's not like you get a few fish doing it. You get dozens.
As many as you want.
As many as you want, you know.
Very cool.
But the thing is, I don't know if that technique would literally work anywhere else. I think it would, because it seemed to be so effective. But where else am I going to try that kind of thing?
Right. How do you open the book on that one without a place like that?
Yeah.
I mean, that trip just was so special. I encourage anyone listening, if you have a place like that, keep it close. Take your friends there that you can trust.
Yeah, we're not dropping any names.
We're not dropping any names. That was pretty special. But anything else that you were curious about this year with the whole experience? I mean, you did lots of fishing too. Was there anything that you learned on the water beyond anything that you've shared?
Yeah, well, since starting the Masters at Queens, I had the luxury of exploring the St. Lawrence River for the first time. And I got to do quite a bit of fishing from the boat, just with the lab, but also shore fishing. That's something, obviously, being from Niagara here and not having my own boat, just the kayak, I think I've become pretty good at over the years, shore fishing. So getting to apply what I knew about shore fishing the Niagara River to shore fishing on the St. Lawrence River was a ton of fun, because it's a pretty populated area, but not too many really educated shore fishermen, at least that I saw. I'm sure there's fantastic shore fishermen, but most people do have boats being in Kingston.
Right.
So I was able to find a few shore spots that were incredibly productive with St. Lawrence caliber smallmouth and even largemouth. So that was incredibly exciting to kind of open up that can of worms. And then also my expectation of the St. Lawrence was that it was going to be a lot like the Upper Niagara River. Couldn't be more wrong, because most areas, at least close to Kingston, set up more like the lake. The current is pretty slow, that it's not like the Niagara where you're doing drifts.
Right.
You're more spot locked. That's the most effective way to fish it in a lot of cases. Further upriver, yeah, you're doing drifts and stuff, but that was interesting to see how that expectation curbed.
So in those experiences, was there anything that you took away from overall fishing, like, oh, I should look out for this more, or, you know, when I do this, this is what I found?
Yeah, Navionics was super helpful for finding shore spots as well. I think a lot of guys think of it just as a tool for when you're on the water finding spots.
Yeah.
But whether you're a boat fisherman or a shore angler, I highly recommend Navionics, because that's how I found the most productive shore spot for me. Just found an area where it went from shore to like a 15-foot flat within casting distance. That's a big thing too. And you're zooming in on the map, it can be kind of tricky to think, okay, like, is that shelf within a casting distance?
Yeah.
If you find it is, it's a great way to find some spots. And you can do that with any water body that's close to your house. Just zoom in on the map and see, okay, like, where might be the best spot to be doing making a cast. Even places like Port Dalhousie close to us here.
Yep.
I mean, so many guys are just used to going to the same spot on the pier and just drifting because they've caught fish there before. But that's pretty well charted in Navionics.
Sure.
You get up the Navionics app, zoom in on it, and you can see, oh, like, you know what? Maybe I'm always catching fish here because, yeah, there's that little hole or that hump. But wow, there's a hump and a hole that looked just like that a little bit further down the pier, or just anywhere. And I don't know, I think people get so stuck in the ways of a spot that they like that they forget there's a lot of value in trying to find something else like it.
Absolutely.
And reproducing it. And Navionics is such an amazing tool for that, even for the shore fishermen. So if there's any shore fishermen out there listening that don't have Navionics, I think that's probably the best investment you can make.
It's number one.
Yeah.
Definitely. We're not sponsored by them either.
We are not sponsored by Navionics.
Love Navionics.
We love Navionics.
I even have it on my computer.
I do as well.
I love that's my dirty little secret, is sometimes I just like to look at maps.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah, it's fun because you can feel like you're finding a spot you're not even out in the water.
Yeah, I didn't even have to drive there.
Yeah. And then the level of satisfaction, like we were talking about, you find the spot on your phone the night before, you go and you catch a fish on that spot. That's a super satisfying thing because you found something new, and you did that little bit of prep work and it rewarded you with something, which, as I was saying before, can be even more satisfying and exciting than just going back to a spot where you've always caught fish.
So much learned this past year. I hope for the listeners that it was also productive for you with exploring. If you got a chance to fish some new stuff, if you fished a lot of your favorite stuff, I hope it was productive. Obviously, we're entering a new year. As we close out the show, I just want to thank you for listening, encourage you to get outside and go fishing, of course. And yeah, don't be closed-minded with your fishing. Try some new stuff. It will make you a better angler. If you fish new areas, fish new species, keep growing, keep exploring. That's it. Yeah. And I'd like to thank Victor for joining the show today. We'll be back with some more episodes coming up in the new year. I've got a few new projects for those who follow on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and drop in the comments what you want to try doing more of in 2023. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the Love of Fishing podcast. I'm your host, Lyle Gator, with guest
Victor Papaiz. Thanks for having me on. It was a great time.
Peace.